Hi, this is Anthony. Welcome back to Testive Advisor.
This is Carlos.
And this is Ben. I hope that you've been finding it pretty easy to keep up with your daily practice on the Testive website, to do the problems of the week, and to follow along with the lessons each week. If you're finding that it's hard to keep yourself on track, to stay motivated, or to keep accountable to what you've planned, get in touch with us and consider an upgrade to Testive coaching.
This week, we're going to be looking at some essential grammar questions that are going to show up on the exam.
This first question is a pretty typical agreement question that you would see when you're being tested on grammar. So when I say agreement, what I'm talking about is making sure that two or more things within the paragraph or sentence that you're looking at agree with each other. In this case, we have a highlighted portion, these remain, and we're looking here at both a pronoun and a verb. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at our pronoun, these, and we want to make sure that this pronoun, these, matches with its antecedent. Antecedent is just a fancy word for the noun that the pronoun is replacing. So in this case, we want to find our antecedent and see what these is replacing. So we're going to go back to the beginning of our sentence. Human infants develop the sense of touch first, and these remain both emotionally and physically central through their lives. Now, you might be tricked into thinking we're talking about human infants here, but wouldn't make sense to say they remain emotionally and physically central throughout their own lives. The antecedent here is the sense of touch. So we're replacing the sense of touch. So the next thing that we're going to ask ourselves is this singular or plural? Well, the sense of touch is just one thing, so it's singular. So we're dealing with a singular antecedent, and now we look back at our pronoun, these, and we see that it's plural. These is plural. So these don't match. This pronoun and its antecedent don't match, so we're going to need to change something here. So we can rule out at least one answer choice right off the bat. We can rule out no change. We know it's wrong. We have a plural pronoun and a singular antecedent. We can also rule out these infants remain because that hasn't changed what we need to change, which is the word these. So let's take a look at our next one here because it looks pretty... Actually, let's look at our last one first. Our senses remain. We can rule that out too because we're not talking about ourselves. We're referring in the third person to human infants. We're not talking about ourselves. So at this point, you've ruled out enough answers to select this remains as your correct answer, but let's see why that works if you were working from the other direction. So we know we need a singular pronoun. This is our only singular choice here, so we have to go with that. And then the next thing that we have to do is make sure that our verb also matches in terms of plurality. So the sense of touch is singular. The sense of touch remain, or the sense of touch remains. Remains is the singular format of the verb, so this is our correct answer choice.
Now, this question is typical of meaning questions. Meaning questions will require you to take into account the context that the highlighted portion of the sentence occurs in to try to figure out the answer. Something that I recommend you do when you see a meaning question is take a look at the answer choices real quick. You see here that the subject changes a lot. We're talking about either skeptics, infants, just individuals that are doubtful or disbelieving individuals. Some of these seem to be very similar to each other, but infants sticks out. So let's go ahead and begin considering answer choice C here, infants are. Although scientists have long understood the power of touch, infants are more cautious in their willingness to elevate this sense over all others. Now, this is a completely fine sentence grammatically, which is what complicates this. Now, does it make sense in the context of the passage? Well, if you look at the sentence immediately before this, and it's a good idea for you to read at least one sentence before and after if you haven't read the passage all the way through, though reading all the way through is ideal. Read this sentence very closely here. Human infants develop the sense of touch first, and that sense, I guess, remains both emotionally and physically central throughout their lives, throughout the infants' lives. So it's not that infants are going to be more cautious in their willingness to elevate the sense over all others. It seems that it's going to remain central to their lives. So we can get rid of answer choice C from the context of the sentence that way. Now let's go ahead and consider the others here. Disbelieving individuals are being more cautious. Okay, nothing necessarily wrong with that. Let's look at answer choice B. Skeptics have been more cautious. What we see here is have long understood is in the past, and skeptics here have been in the past makes a bit more sense than keeping this here in the present are being. Also, disbelieving individuals and skeptics are the same thing. Skeptics is a more concise way of expressing that part of the sentence. So basically, we want to go with the most concise answer, not just the one that I guess conforms to the meaning of the context. So that already makes answer choice B a better answer choice. Now let's consider between B and D. Individuals that are doubtful are. So although scientists have long understood the power of touch, individuals that are doubtful are more cautious in their willingness to elevate the sense over all others. Again, same deal here. The have been seems to be a little bit more in line with the previous part of the sentence, but nothing necessarily wrong with answer choice D, except that individuals that are doubtful, one more time, is very similar to skeptics. They mean the same thing. So because skeptics is more concise, we can cross answer choice D out as well. And that's how we end up with answer choice B as our best answer. The following is an example of a concision question. This kind of question will require you to identify two or more answer choices that express virtually the same idea and to know to select the most concise answer choice from among them. Let's read the sentence with a highlighted portion. Watson urged and then warned parents to refrain from hugging or kissing their children, warning that such physical behavior will lead to weak and mawkish adults. Now, in this highlighted portion of the sentence, which is at the beginning, I see no error. We've got Watson, which is a subject, and urge, which is the verb, and I guess then we have another verb here with warned, but nothing necessarily wrong. So that looks like a good answer choice so far. Let's go ahead and consider answer choice B now. Watson urged parents to refrain from hugging or kissing their children. There's nothing wrong with this construction either, however. And here again, we have our subject in Watson and our verb in urged. Now, the question is, answer choice A is longer. It's less concise. So I told you this was a concision question. That's probably going to, the fact that this one is more concise is going to affect our answer. But did answer choice A actually provide any new information here? Is there a reason for which answer choice A would be better than answer choice B? Watson urged, and then warned parents to refrain from hugging or kissing their children. Now, we do have a new piece of information, but that piece of information is not essential for the rest of the passage to hold coherence. And your job is not to pick the answer choice with the most information necessarily, but the one that will be most concise while keeping the coherence of the passage. That's literally all that you have to do for concision problems. So even though there's more information here, and to warn and to urge are not quite the same thing, answer choice B is the most concise one, and the addition of the word to warn here is not essential to the passage. So that makes answer choice A worse than answer choice B. Let's go ahead and consider the other answer choices. Watson, who gave warnings to parents, to refrain from hugging or kissing their children. The problem there is when we have this clause here in between commas, it can no longer be considered part of the active sentence. This isn't part of the independent clause under consideration. It becomes its own sort of dependent clause that's going to be modifying Watson. It's going to be explaining what Watson did. Watson, who gave warnings to parents, so now we have our subject here, but our verb is no longer there. This is not part of the independent clause. That means that we expect another verb here. What did Watson do for this clause to actually be independent? Well, we don't have a verb provided because we have an infinitive, which is a noun. To refrain is not an active verb. So that for that reason, we can get rid of answer choice C. And then we're left with the last answer choice here. Watson, again, same thing. Dependent clause, not part of the independent clause. To refrain. So once again, we're missing our verb. Our verb is missing for this sentence. So that makes answer choice D equally incorrect, which leaves us then with answer choice B as the correct answer choice.
So here we have a question on possessives. Let's read the phrase immediately before the highlighted portion. Although he acknowledged that parents have an obligation to feed, clothe, and care for their children, he argued that any type of touching, which he called caressing, leads to weakness and an inability to meet life's demands. When we see an S, generally we can assume either it's a plural or a possessive. Life, when it becomes plural, is spelled with a V. So this form life's is incorrect and never exists in proper English. What we actually want to be saying here is that the demands belong to a single life, that is, life in general. So let's look at our answer choices. We've already determined that no change isn't going to work because life just isn't a word here. So no change is not an option. Let's look at the second answer choice, the demands of the living. You always need to remember that you want to be conveying the original meaning of the sentence. And here, demands of the living changes that original meaning because the living refers to a group of people and not the idea of life in general. So we can cross this out. This answer choice, again, uses the phrase the living. It's just a different form of the above answer, but again, we've already ruled out that this does not convey the meaning of the original sentence. And then we're left with life's demands. Here, you'll notice that this apostrophe S is indicating the possession. So they are the demands of life, the demands belonging to life, and this is going to be our final answer.
Let's read this question aloud. The act was one of the first of its kind in American history and established a system whereby the government could assess individual inventions and grant a limited monopoly on those ideas that are truly novel. Okay, so I can tell that really we're just kind of focused on this first clause here because when we see its kind in, I can see that we're dealing with this idiom, the first of its kind. Okay, the first of its kind. And I put a blank there because we actually don't know what form we're going to be using yet. Now, I can see we have 4 answer choices here, and one of them is significantly different than the other 3. Anytime I see that, that's a little bit of a red flag to where I'm going to look at that one first and just decide whether there's any reason to substitute it in. The act was one of the first of that type of American history. The act was not a type of American history. We're going to rule that out. So now we're really dealing with this idiom, the first of its kind. Now, there are a few quick things to remember here that are just going to guide us towards our answer. Okay, so the first thing is that there are only 2 appropriate versions of the word its. We have its with an apostrophe, and we have its without an apostrophe. Its with an apostrophe is a contraction. It is not a possessive. It's a contraction that stands for it is. It's without an apostrophe, maybe a little bit confusing, but without an apostrophe is a possessive. Okay, and it's with an apostrophe at the end is not a proper English word. We never use it, so we can always rule that out if we see it. Okay? In this case, we don't want to be saying the act was one of the first of it is kind in American history. That just simply doesn't make sense. So we're going to rule out no change, and that leaves us with the possessive form of the word its without an apostrophe.
This example is an example of a verbs question. Verbs questions are going to be asking for the best grammatical rendering of the verb in the highlighted portion of a sentence. So let's go ahead and read this sentence here. While patents had existed in other countries, such as Italy and France, for many years, and were even known in ancient Greece, Americans embraced the concept of intellectual property in a manner that was unrivaled by their foreign counterparts. Now, there's nothing wrong with had existed. It is in the past, and we have a helping verb here, had, that modifies exist, so that it implies it maybe further in the past that simply while patents existed, they had been existing, sort of. They had existed in other countries for many years. This presents absolutely no problem so far. Let's see if we find something a little bit better. while patents exists in other countries. Well, the problem with this is that in the first place, this is in the present. And we saw in the context of this sentence, it makes sense for it to have been in the past because we're talking about something that has, or I guess something could be going on in the present for many years. But it's a bit strange to say this. And more importantly, we have other verbs in the past. Were even known in ancient Greece. Americans embraced the concept of intellectual property in a manner that was unrivaled by their foreign counterparts. All of these words are in the past tense. So we can't go ahead and sort of stick in a present tense verb. The other problem is patents is a plural noun. And I know that S at the end of the verb here makes it seem like exists was plural as well. But think about it. When you have an S after a verb, it usually serves to denote a singular conjugation. And this is usually the third person. So he, she, or it, and let's just come up with a couple examples here. Does. We don't say he do or she do or it do. We say it does, she does, he does, with an S at the end. Works. We don't say he work or she work, but he works, she works, it works, etc. So this is, for those two reasons, it is in the present and it is a singular conjugation when patents is a plural. There's more than one patent. Answer choice B then was wrong. Okay, answer choice C then, which I'm assuming is this one because of the weird ordering, it's hard to tell. While patents were existing in other countries, such as Italy and France for many years, nothing necessarily wrong with this either, but we have this ing ending at the end of this verb here. This is a construction we generally want to avoid. And we also have a helping verb, were. There is absolutely no difference between had existed and were existing, other than were existing is in a construction that we do not like for this test. You want to avoid constructions ending in ing. So that makes answer choice A better than answer choice C here. Okay, and that leaves us with answer choice D. While patents had an existence in other countries. Nothing necessarily different. Again, is no longer a helping verb here. It's actually what was had, and the object now is an existence. So while patents had an existence is correct, but it is less concise now than answer choice A. And like we saw in that previous example, we want to pick the most concise answer choice. So that leaves had existed as the best answer for this problem.
This question is dealing with relative pronouns. That's just a fancy way of talking about words like whom, who, and which. The first question we want to ask when dealing with relative pronouns is, what is it referring to, or what is its antecedent? From now on, I'm just going to call what it's referring to its antecedent. So let's read this first part of the sentence. The original Patent Act established a three-person board comprised of the Secretary of State, Secretary of War, and Attorney General, whom had sole authority to determine whether to grant or deny patent applications. If we look at this phrase right here, which I'm going to bracket out with parentheses, it's not essential to the meaning of the sentence. You could just as easily say the original Patent Act established a three-person board whom had sole authority to determine whether to grant or deny patent applications. That would still be a complete sentence. You would still get most of the meaning there. So this actually will help us to figure out what this whom is referring to, what is its antecedent. It actually becomes pretty apparent that the antecedent is going to be board right here. It's the board that has authority, not a patent act. A patent act is a piece of paper. So let's go through our answer choices now. One option is no change. We want to ask, is this board a person or not? If the board is a person, then we want to use who or whom to refer to it. But if it's not a person, we want to use which. Since the board is not a person, it's made up of people, but it's not a person itself, we can't use whom or who. We have to use which. So that for that reason, no change is not one of our options. Which had seems like it could work. Let's come back to that in a second. But what about and had? Well, if we say and had here, it makes it seem like the Patent Act is what had sole authority, and we've already said that it's the board. So let's rule out that. Being possessed of makes this sentence really wordy, and also would make it seem like we're talking about just the Attorney General. It just would make the sentence very confusing in general, so that's not a good choice either. You always want to try to pick an answer choice that's going to be clear and concise and not create unnecessary confusion. So that leaves us with which had as our final answer. So this question is testing the punctuation that we're using right here. So I want to begin by talking about a semicolon and when to use it, and also when you can't use commas. So let's say we have a simple sentence like, the dog ran. The dog ate lunch. Ignore this T, that's supposed to be capitalized, my bad. So we're talking about this punctuation right here. Now, it could be tempting to think that we could have a comma as our punctuation right here. And the reason you can't do that is because when you have two complete sentences with a subject, I'm going to mark that with an S, and a verb. And again, here we have a subject and a verb. You need to separate them with a punctuation other than a comma. So then we have what's called a semicolon. You can think of it as a super comma of sorts. So if you used a semicolon here, it can actually separate these two complete clauses successfully. It's used like a period, but with two complete thoughts that are more connected than with a period, but you don't have to remember that here. And then one more thing I want to talk about is the colon. So colon is two dots, right? And a colon either says that after this, you're going to provide a list or expand on the thought that came before it, but it can't be used in the same way that a period, comma, or semicolon could, just to break things apart. So let's go back to our sentence at hand now. The patent board determined the duration for each patent. However, the act provided that no patent could last longer than 14 years. So are we listing anything after this colon, or really expounding upon something? No. So we can rule out no change. Do we have two complete thoughts here? Would we want to use a semicolon? Well, our subject here is going to be the patent board, and our verb is going to be determined. And then our subject here is going to be the act, and provide is going to be our verb. So it seems like we do in fact have two complete thoughts, so we want the semicolon. Here there's just no punctuation at all, which would create a run-on. And as we've said before, the comma just isn't strong enough to separate two complete thoughts, so we can eliminate this answer choice as well.
That's it for today. Thanks for following along. We hope that this grammar lesson was informative and helpful to you. Happy prepping.
Wait. What does a grammar nerd call Santa's helpers?
I don't know. What is it called?
Subordinate clauses.